Welcome back to the Use and Abuse of Laura Endicott. This is Chapter 7, Applied Within, Scene 2. I was not invited to all of the many meetings had between Sarah and Hargreaves that ensued both between the two visits of the police and thereafter, but I was most pressingly asked to be in attendance by the both of them during the actual in-house interviews of the prospective new domestics. I assented with goodwill, and Sarah had embraced me as if she were my younger sister. Miss Endicott, the key feature of each of these interviews is, and I shall ask you to vouchsafe my own opinions, that no one we take on will take the least liberty with the lady miss or her sister. Hargreaves spoke in undertones, as the first knot of these aspirants was waiting in the main foyer. I nodded in agreement. I have no doubt we shall make that position utterly clear. If any of this lot registers an objection, no matter how tacit, at working in a house owned and run by young persons, we must reject them outright. We should also look for over-eager persons, if you follow. I do, Miss Endicott, though I hesitate to imagine what would happen to anyone who might seek to accost Miss Olivia in the night. Indeed, yes, indeed. I shuddered a little at this point and had to steady myself before Hargreaves called the first person in. Our plan was to make the hires and present the entire new staff to Sarah, indeed to the Lady Miss Montford, to be proper, of a piece. At that point she herself would make her speech to them. I was intrigued, and thus looking forward to listening to my elder pupil perform in such a role. I trust that the family solicitor was able to provide Sarah with a satisfactory amount of moneys to refurnish the household with an appropriate staff, I murmured to Hargreaves. He nodded, but added, There are such moneys, but several of the usual pieces will be missing. Both daughters volunteered to eschew personal maids, for instance. I doubt that will be much of a misfortune, given their druthers. I entirely agree. In a sense, it was one more level of either oversight or yet interference that has been removed, and I applaud it. Now I nodded my agreement. It also represented a manner in which to avoid what might have potentially been a constant source of friction. Hargreaves continued. There will also be no butler, instead simply a valet. I have myself hired on the son and daughter-in-law of an old friend, and as such they are to be trusted completely. They will fill the roles of stableman and driver, and cook respectively, and will live without the house in the gatehouse. I widened my eyes, as I had for some reason not thus far noted such an outbuilding. But all of this was news salutary, to keeping both an ordered but also placid estate. The gardening and what have you was to continue as an external contract, with such persons on the property only once a week. I had as well not noted them, but then it dawned upon me that we were yet in winter, and such services would not be fully required for some weeks yet. And not long after their return would occasion the return of my very own, the tender of my soul's garden. So today we are essentially hiring for valet, housemaids, and charwoman. Yes, 3 maids this time, given the size of the house. And for you, Miss Endicott? Oh, no. No, I shall duly follow the daughter's lead on that. After all, it shan't be all that long now before Mr. Rossiter arrives. He, too, would require no manservant. I had to struggle to imagine Philip even knowing how to interact with such a fellow. So, in the house itself, it was to be 5 persons in toto. That was a manageable staff. I had volunteered to divide my time between my duties as governess, which were now minimal in any case, and those of manageress. In a sense, I was to become Hargreaves' counterpart, though not necessarily counterpoint. Sarah would need another woman, after all, to aid her in attaining adulthood, though I very much doubted my own capabilities to either regard, that is, not only in helping her, but in so being one myself. The interviews proceeded apace. Hargreaves had posted a single, and by contemporary standards, singular advertisement, which read along the lines of, Domestic staff of 5, required for traditional noble house. Positions include 3 housemaids, charwoman as cook's assistant and valet. Applicants must vow their loyalty to a young person who has recently inherited both title and estate, and must be willing to show the utmost deference and at all times to both the title holder and to her younger sister. I myself had approved the terms, since I was ostensibly the resident wordsmith, and speaking of terms, Sarah had generously given me a notable rise in salary, even as my duties waned to a sliver. At first I made to refuse it, but the lady miss pressed it upon me, saying that she had made no allowances for Mr. Rossiter. I replied that he should damn well look after himself, though with a grin, which Sarah had evidently appreciated. The advertisement would serve to weed out more traditionally oriented servants and perhaps bring forward a crop of youthful types, not much older than the girls themselves, whom Hargreaves and I could train to their own somewhat precise demands. It was an unexpectedly small haul from said net, however, and the 4 applicants that appeared on that first day of interviewing were shy, expectant, perhaps all too deferent. I suggested to the manager that the house itself might be somewhat intimidating. We had agreed to not tell any of the staffers about the existence of the passages, and indeed Hargreaves yet knew of only the one, and I had only speculations regarding the knowing of same by either daughter. But he had replied that after all they were going to have to come to know it as it was. To this I silently responded that such knowledge would be too much to bear for any but the most hardy types, but then I paused, wondering if indeed I was myself of such a type, or, yet further, if I in fact knew all there was to be known about the place and its very recent history. Each applicant had brought with him or her a sheaf of papers for previous employers. None had before served in a great house, which was a mark of approval. I had made a table of such virtues in which I could check little boxes off that I had placed beside a description of the features Hargreaves and I were searching for, and none of any of the four of them had had experience with the old landed aristocracy, also a point in their respective favors. The fellow asking for the valet's job was a trifle older than I should have thought ideal, stating that he was 30, but he had spoken of a wife, which might be convenient. "Could your wife take on the role that has been called in the past the charwoman?" I disliked the title for obvious reasons. Chef's assistant would be better, though there were still plenty of odious tasks to be performed. In this odd interaction of living without a staff at all, I myself had performed many of them, but Sarah had herself been, at least half the time, right there beside me doing same. "Aye, she can be fully capable of such. She can cook like the blazes, I do declare. No, we have no children of our own. We'd both make scarce afore the mistress of the place." That was our fifth, then, and I gave Hargreaves quite a feminine wink, both victory and collusion, to which she slightly blushed, the sweet man. This fellow, called Smithy, had responded aright to each of our probing queries. Then again, once we'd made our decisions final, I would address the group, introduce the lady miss, and then she herself would welcome the staff. Hargreaves' connections had been working to re-inhabit the gatehouse, which had fallen into some minor disuse, given that Sir Hugh had had so few visitors in general, but they were also to be present at these joint addresses. At the tail end of the afternoon Hargreaves gave a sigh of relief. The three young women who had applied for the various roles of housemaids seemed satisfactory enough. Yet I was on the edge of my seat, as it were. The final test beforehand would be to somehow gauge their reactions to the presence of Sarah. Her sister had bowed out of the entire process, however graciously or no, I could not ascertain. Hargreaves was nervous about it, I could tell. I prayed in my own benighted fashion that Philip could arrive post-haste, not that he himself could summarily take over any specific duty, official or no, but just his presence, which I had pined for to the depths of my heart, growing the fonder of in and by his enduring absence, as the epigram told, would be enough to set my mind at ease, and I had not yet either the courage or simple nerve to approach Olivia and ask the questions that needed to be so asked. "If all 7 of you could gather in this room in 1 hour," I suggested. "Smithy would have to run back into town and fetch his wife, for one, and Hargreaves would himself have to stroll over to the gatehouse to return with his 2 acquaintances. Really, rather more than that," he assured me, so I was left with informing Sarah that her presence could thence be effected. "I am ever so grateful to you, Laura, for taking on such an unexpected and onerous set of tasks. My God, the 2 of us, in the kitchen, in the cellars, fixing a chimney yet! We shall from now on live much more properly, even staidly, I should hope." Good Lord, yes, but staidly in such a place as this? "Are you ready for this, Sarah?" "Do you not think I am?" "It matters not a whit what I think, my dear thing, not about a single thing. This is your estate now, your property, your moneys, your name, and your status. You are the Lady Miss Montfort, and I dare say one of the most eligible young women in all the realm." To this she coloured up, but broke out of her embarrassment by laughing it away. "I think you must know by now that I shall never marry. I have been wedded to this estate, on the one side, but more importantly, I would never again betray my sister. Any sort of divided loyalties on my part would constitute such, and I shall absolutely and resolutely refuse all comers. Indeed, Livy would do so on my behalf." Yes, she very well might. Sarah had spoken to me rapidly, but there was something within what she had just said that had twigged me. For the moment I could not place it, and now here were our 7 new compliments, which meant I had to docket anything I might have observed about Sarah's mannerism or words to both. Sarah and I did not have the bearing, and I neither the breeding, to have truly swept into the room, as custom dictated. We made the best of it, and Hargreaves had gathered our fresh troops afore us. They stood there somewhat nervously, as was to be expected. As agreed, I spoke first. "I am Laura Endicott, the estate manageress and very much part-time governess. On behalf of the Montforts, I wish to welcome each of you to Arlemont, the hereditary estate of said family. I have myself only been residing here for 3 months, or thereabouts, but I have witnessed the transition from the old to the new. from one generation to the next, and I have complete and utter faith in the new title holder standing here next to me. Despite her actual age, the Lady Miss Montfort is wholly mature, even wise, and I commend to you her sensibilities about not only what is necessary here in this place, but as well the world at large. I have had the honour of tutoring both she and her sister for this period, and both have matriculated far beyond any idea that they, either of them, remain in their but tender years. In this I must resolutely underline the caution we had placed in the advertisement that brought you here. No friction with the daughters of Montfort will be tolerated, and no aspersion shall be cast against them, of the body, of the mind, or of the spirit. I do not imagine beforehand that any of you would take such a liberty, nor do I hold any bigotry against any one of you, but I shall end, perhaps, on such a note. The Lady Miss and Miss is how each shall be addressed respectively, and you may, of course, address me as Miss Endicott. All that said, you shall find this household to be managed in a manner that is often the very opposite of other great houses, and perhaps especially those of the bourgeois. If any injustice befalls you, I shall take up your cause with reason and vigour, and Mr. Hargreaves and I do expect each of you to work together and to support one another in common cause with the Lady Miss and her sister. Here at Montfort we are a community undivided by pettiness, tradition for its own sake, and pecuniary concerns. That is all. Hargreaves had made to put his hands together in applause, but it was Sarah herself who got in before him. Now I found myself colouring up ever so slightly, and nodding myself out of the limelight. It was now time for Sarah to speak, and a hush had once again fallen over our tiny community, as I so fervently hoped it would thence become. I am indebted in many ways to Miss Endicott, who, arriving at the very cusp of a series of crises, has nevertheless navigated with the gallantry and competence of a veritable James Cook through such perilous waters. And of course to Mr. Hargreaves, who has been with my family for over half a century. To him you shall bend every ear, and from him receive every wisdom. And finally to my sister Olivia, who has declined meeting you at this first juncture due to her, dare I say, misplaced loyalty to my title. Olivia is my right hand, and to her you must, and I repeat must, cleave to any and every command which she might utter, and from whom you shall thence receive an uncommon loyalty and sense of duty. Olivia is of the very best England can yet produce. She has saved my life. As for I myself, I am now, unexpectedly, the Lady Miss Montfort, yes, but I shall neither treat any of you with the contempt often found in other houses, nor shall I expect a slavish servitude of either your demeanour of your duties. We shall prepare for Sundays together, so that we can share in that day of rest, but your beliefs shall be your own, and you must lend to them your succour and worship only privately. Just so, I shall not tolerate any proselytizing amongst the staff, or indeed beyond it, touching upon the valour and honour of this house and its family. In sum, then, I once again welcome you, one and all, and please be welcomed, as you take up each your respective vocations under the canopy of both nobility and empire alike. To this there was a cheery applause, and the younger novitiates gave one another expressions of relief mixed with an interested astonishment. Sarah had acquitted herself extremely well, and I made for her in that moment to tell her so. We are paying them twice the usual rates, so I would think much of that good cheer rests upon that fact alone, was what she said in reply. Utter nonsense, Sarah. Please give yourself all due credit. With that single address you have crossed a limit few persons your age have ever crossed. You should rank yourself with the youthful kings and queens of old Britain. Ha ha! Let us hope then it is not to be Queen Jane. Not at all. Good heavens, no. Good Lord. I shall wield any sword to protect your rule, and ere you fall it shall be across my already fallen form. That is most moving to me. Goodness, Laura, I am in all things your servant for such sentiment. I am unworthy thereof and therein. I am unworthy. But you need not concern yourself with falling upon my behalf, for I am already fallen. The Evangels speak of the twice-born. So now my goal is, given my current state and status, is to avoid becoming the twice-died, as it were. I shook my head with concern, but she was smiling even so. There had been a series of clues, all mixed about in my addled mind, that Sarah had uttered. I tried in vain to string them as one thing. First she had alluded to some kind of betrayal of her sister. Then she said Olivia had saved her life. And now that she herself had already fallen, what was the meaning of it? Or had I simply imputed any possible meaning? But there was no time at this juncture to press inquiries. The duties of the household must carry the days and weeks ahead, as our romance slowly, but with dignity, resurrected itself. Thank you for listening.